All right, good morning. I'm Olivia Campa. I'm an assistant clinical professor of internal medicine at the University of California, Davis. So thank you all so much for being here. Today we're going to talk about pursuing a career in graduate medical education. So the objectives for this session, at the end of this session, participants will be able to define what GME is, review Gme Leadership Structure, roles, and responsibilities, understand Gme leadership opportunities for medical students, residents, and fellows, describe traits and attributes that make trainees competitive applicants for GME roles, outline pathways to GME leadership, and apply the PAUSE framework to problem solving in GME. Okay, so a little bit before we get started about my professional journey. So I am a faculty member at UC Davis. I am a first generation college graduate. So by far the first person in my family to go to college and definitely to become a doctor. In order for me to kind of navigate my professional journey, I needed a lot of help. I needed a lot of direction from people that were outside of my personal network. And so I sought a lot of mentorship. And part of seeking this mentorship was meeting people that had a very different journey from me. So this is my first mentor. Her name is Denise Abele. She's a radiologist at the University of California, Los Angeles. She was actually the first physician I ever met kind of outside my pediatrician's office. And she really took an interest in me and kind of identified skills and talents that I had and said, Olivia, why don't you become a doctor? And I said, I don't know what this all entails. It seems like a lot of work. And she really kind of pushed me. So we worked together. We worked on this very large clinical trial called the National Lung Screening Trial, which has now become one of the bigger trials to be performed in the US. And she headed that trial nationally. So she's just like this powerhouse of a woman physician, and really just showed me so much about what it is not only to be a physician, but a physician leader. I then went on to the University of California, Davis, where I met a new group of mentors. So this is Dr. Jorge Garcia, Efrain Talamantes, Dr. Jose Morfin. And these were really the first people I ever met who had similar backgrounds as me, came from similar places as me. And I saw the amazing work in diversity and inclusion that they were doing. And I was like, I want to be just like them. And so as an early medical student, I kind of got inspired by these people and said, okay, what do I need to do next? And then comes everyone else. So lots and lots of clinical mentorship, lots of scholarly mentorship, lots of leadership mentorship. So many people contributed to my professional journey, and I'm grateful that I was able to be in spaces where I was able to have access to these amazing people, because without them, I would have no idea what it would be like to be a doctor, a physician leader, a physician educator. So this has really formed kind of my professional pathway. So what do I do now? I'm first and foremost a Latina. I think I will always identify first as a Latina. I'm a general internist, so I'm trained in internal medicine. I did a chief residency year in internal medicine and was actually one of the first people of color to be selected as a chief resident in my institution. I am now the director of the post-baccalaureate program, so I do pathway programming to help diversify our healthcare workforce. I'm a medical educator, so I teach in the medical school in the residency program. And I also teach on the faculty end. So I do a lot of trainings around diversity and inclusion, communication, transgender healthcare delivery. And I'm a core faculty member in GME, Graduate Medical Education. And, you know, a lot of this interest came from when I was a chief resident. I decided to be the chair of the Resident Medical Staff Committee, which was the committee that worked with the executive leadership to represent the residents. And that was a very formative experience for me because I got to see kind of the administrative side of medicine. And I became very interested in how medicine works, how decisions are made, who's sitting at the table and contributing to the thoughts. And so I also identify as an innovative thinker. I think that the pandemic, although very difficult on us as physicians, it also pushed us to work outside of our comfort zone. And the amount of gain around technology we were able to do was really incredible. And a chunk of my job is also in the clinical operations realm. So kind of spanning this undergraduate medical education, graduate medical education into the faculty and health system is I get to work kind of in these different arenas. Okay, so let's start with some opening reflections from the group. What is an administrative or interpersonal conflict you all were asked to resolve? So if you all can take a moment to reflect on it. And if someone wouldn't mind sharing a meaningful experience they had, and it could be, again, a conflict in a clinical arena, it could be in an administrative role. So would anyone be willing to share?
Sure, I could share.
Thank you, Sri.
Shrey. So my medical school has this distinction track, which is kind of like a parallel curriculum that students can sign up for. And so I was one of the leaders of the Leadership and Innovation in Healthcare distinction track, kind of a long name, but we call it LIHDT for short. And after my role in the leadership of that track, we recruited some underclassmen to lead. And we're having a lot of difficulties getting them to sort of step up and stay on top of the action items that needed to occur. And so this was kind of challenging because the track really relies on the leadership to make sure that the functionings of the track go forward because it's the only student-run track. And so it was challenging at first. I would check in with them frequently and try to see how to try to see what their barriers were to really staying on top of the action items. And it's been an ongoing issue, but one of the things that I ultimately tried to do was to put together a timeline document. And I realized that micromanaging was not really helpful, that it was maybe adding stress, even though I was really invested in the success of the program. So I just tried to put together a document and then hand it over to them and try to step back and offer support periodically rather than sort of serving as more of an accountability mechanism. Yeah.
Great. So what did you learn from kind of your approach to that experience? And is there anything that you would have done differently?
Yeah, I there's definitely stuff I would have done differently. I think those realizations haven't maybe fully hit me yet because it's still sort of ongoing, and I think the track is altering a little bit, to be honest. I think a lot of things play into that. One of the things was the transition to virtual. One of the things is changing incentive systems for student participation at the sort of at the curriculum level. But I think one of the things from the beginning is maybe setting really clear expectations about the role. Maybe also having a more active leader recruitment process, because I think having leaders that are equally invested in the role is really important. Those are some of the things I can think of, but open to suggestions.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you for sharing. Yeah, there's no right answer to this stuff, right? It's like you do the best you can, learn the tools that you can and apply them. All right, so let's jump into GME, or graduate medical education. So what is GME? So GME is the phase after people graduate from medical school and into residency, fellowship, additional fellowships, all the way to the faculty, to people entering the faculty or entering into the workforce to function independently. All right, so this is kind of the trajectory through medical educations, we have college, medical school, that is UME, residency and fellowship, which is GME, and the rest of your life you get to do CME, which is a joyous thing to participate in. So some GME leadership structures, this just gives an idea of different ways that people can get involved in GME. So usually you will have some form of local structure. So this is going to be structure within your hospital or institution. There are more residency programs that are opening up within private health systems. So your local structure might be GME within a health system that you're working in who's decided to expand their training workforce. It can be specialty specific. So you can get involved in GME within your specialty. That can be also locally in your region on a state level. And then it can also be at a national level. So there are many opportunities to get involved in GME in many different capacities. GME leadership, this is an example of what GME leadership can look like in an academic institution. So this is what it looks like in an institution like UC Davis. You have your chief residents, core faculty, you have associate program directors, and then you have program directors. Usually the program directors all fall under a designated institutional officer. This title can be different across institutions. So it can be, we have a dean of GME / a DIO. And so the title may vary across institutions. And then in private health systems, it can vary even more. And they usually report to some form of a vice dean or dean, and also report to the hospital CEO. So one of the things I personally like about GME is that it lives both in the School of Medicine and in the health system. And for me, who likes to fluctuate in the School of Medicine or the health system, depending on what mood I'm in or what month it is, usually around budget season, I'm like, I'm gonna go to medical school now. And then after budget season over, I'm like, okay, I'm back. All the fighting is over. I'm gonna return. So I like that you have this ability to have impact on patient care delivery and education. And often I've noticed that GME leadership is really they are advocating to tie in these two missions in a way that helps patient care, which hopefully is the reason we are here at the end of the day, is for patient care. So some GME leadership that's specialty specific. So this is just a few examples of organizations to get involved in at a specialty level. So Alliance for Academic Internal Medicine. So this is within internal medicine, AAIM. Association of Pediatric Program Directors, APPD. American Academy of Family Physicians, AAFP. Association of Professors of Gynecology and Obstetrics, APGO. Oftentimes these organizations can serve as your kind of professional home where you can meet like-minded people, you can get ideas for your programming, you can have discussions about sticky issues that occur in your institution that you want to help with brainstorming. It can be really helpful as you develop your career to start developing mentorship and collegial networks, because there's also the peer mentorship aspect, both within your environments, but also external to your environments at a national level, because there's lots of cool things being done across the country. So it's great to have these networks you can tap into. There's also leadership opportunities within these specialty specific networks, which are always great learning experiences and great opportunities for networking and mentorship. So GME leadership at a national level. So the Accredited Council of Graduate Medical Education, or ACGME. So getting involved in national leadership like the ACGME gives you an opportunity to work on policies and procedures. I know for all of us who are diversity champions, when the ACGME implemented some rules around diversity and inclusion training, we were so happy because we were like, yay, now we don't have to push for this, because this is coming from the national entities saying that programs have to do this. Another opportunity I just learned about is you can sign up to be a site visitor at different institutions as a representative for the ACGME. And you can actually do that. They're looking for people at all levels. And so that's also a good opportunity to really see the nuts and bolts of how different programs work. And that can kind of it can help you get an idea of what's going on again across the country. And again, there's opportunities within specialties at the level of the ACGME as well as at this national level. All right, so we just talked about kind of national committees and specialty specific committees. And this is the link to the ACGME for residents and fellows if you're interested in getting involved. And then there's also specialty specific educational organizations, which again can be great opportunities to learn more about educational implementation, curriculum development. There's a double AMC and the American, the AMSA. So American Medical, I forget what AMSA stands for, sorry.
Students Association.
Students Association. Thank you. Okay, more GME leadership opportunities. So again, for those of you who are drawn to leadership, there is always a need for more leadership, but thinking about what are some opportunities that help you develop your career and your pathway. So different schools will have, and different hospitals will have different committees. Committee work is also a great opportunity. So for me, as a junior faculty, I'm going up for my associate professor in a year, and I'm going to need letters external to my department. And the reason I'm able to have these letters is because I do some committee work in areas that I'm interested in. So people can not only speak to my work and what I've done, but also me personally. And we've been able to work together through these hospital committees. So some examples of committees that are associated with GME: the Graduate Medical Education Committee, Curriculum Committee, Program Evaluation Committee, and then Wellness Committee and Diversity Committee. There is a need for resident representation, like at all levels. Quality Improvement Committee, Patient Safety Committee, Research Committee. So Patient Safety Committee is actually one of my favorites because you review cases about what things that didn't go very well, and also get to identify systems issues in the process. So it's not so much about the individual mistakes that occur. Usually the individual mistakes are actually minimal. It's usually about kind of the system as a whole and how can we create a better health system that's safer for patient care. And I started getting involved in that as a resident, and that's something I've continued to do. And I really, really enjoy it because when it teaches me what's happening in our system, like what is the latest and greatest, what are we working on? So I get access to that information. And also personally as a clinician, I find it really nice to be able to review other people's approaches to medicine and think about how do I approach these problems. So it allows me to reflect on my personal practice. All right, traits and attributes for GME leadership. So as a leader, there is a big charge because you are in the spotlight. And so oftentimes when you are a leader, you also have to model good leadership and good citizenship. Set direction and lead change. So when we've taken an approach to problem solving and we've made decisions and maybe things didn't go very well, part of that process is also reflecting on it, learning from it, figuring out how we're going to do things differently in the future. Work with others, but also help to develop others. So one of my favorite things to do is to mentor people. It totally fills my cup. And Joyce gets to mentor me, which I love because she's awesome. So I've benefited from so much mentorship, and I also get to deliver mentorship to others. And I think that is, for me personally, a very important part of my career. Communication skills are really important. Team building, business skills, self-management, emotional intelligence, time management, work-life balance, and lifelong learning. So many of the skills that it does take to be a physician and clinician, but also you have to round out your skills because there are so many different types of things that you are asked to do. So some opportunities for leadership development as a resident or junior faculty. I personally love the AAMC early career leadership conferences. One, they're super fun. You get to meet like so many cool people. You get to do all these activities and do all these different things that challenge you personally and professionally. There's an early career, a mid-career. And then as you progress, there's this great program called Executive Leadership in Medicine, or ELAM, which I'm hoping our 2 senior faculty are enrolled in, if not now, soon in the future. This is a program that helps develop you as an executive leader. So dean's level, if you were to be a chief executive officer, something, really the goal is for your institution to invest in you and say, this person has a great potential to succeed. Part of ELAM is having an institutional project where you have to develop a project and deliver it at your institution, but also part of it is your institution making a commitment to ELAM surrounding you, saying they're going to progress to this level of dean or a chief executive officer. There's also Harvard Medical Leadership Program. So these are just a few examples of leadership development programs, but along with doing leadership work, you do want to learn skills around leadership and have formal training in leadership. Very, very important. Okay, a few more pathways. So this is just an example of many different ways you can get involved in GMU leadership. So through med ed, lots of committees. We have doctoring or kind of working with medical students around patient care delivery training, education awards through these different organizations. You could do quality improvement, patient safety events committee, do a QI course, inpatient, outpatient QI project, diversity and inclusion. There's interest groups, committee work. I did a big project around residency recruitment when I was a resident that I'm very proud of because it helped diversify our residency program. Research, you can be on an institutional research committee, do a project on your own or a poster presentation. And then advocacy, there's medical organizations, lobby day, or leadership roles in the different medical organizations. You don't have to do all these things. It's okay to just pick one. I think oftentimes we get overwhelmed and want to do it all. But these are just some examples of different ways to get involved in GMU leadership. All right, so what are some pathways to GMU leadership? One is to make your interests known. So tell the people that are making the decisions that this is what you want to do. And people will start looking out for opportunities for you. Become involved in your residency program. So if there are committees within your residency program, it's good to be on them if you have the bandwidth to help make decisions. Volunteering for committees, not only at your institution, but regionally and nationally. Be a strong resident. That leads to strong letters of recommendation. If you're offered a chief residency, if you're in a residency program where you do additional year chief, just say yes. So I was an internal medicine resident, and that's something I always tell the people that get offered chief residency. They're like, I don't know if I want to be a leader. I don't know if I said, just say yes. You'll figure it out later. Just say yes. As a junior faculty member, volunteer to help with program activities. Think about becoming an associate program director, sometimes a general role, sometimes in a focused role that might be in alignment with your career development. Participate in education, focus faculty development activities. Learn, teach. Teach, like you can be walking around and teaching. So when the students know that you're someone who likes to teach, they will gravitate to you. So if you are teaching, people will notice. Okay, So this is an example of when I was a resident and how I was able to kind of create a very sustainable solution to a complex problem. So actually, I was in a meeting in my capacity as the chair of the Resident Medical Staff Committee, which is the Health Systems Committee for Residents. And the CMO turns to me and says, Olivia, the residents are unprofessional. Fix it. And I look at him and go, what do you want me to do? And he says, I don't care what you do. I just want you to fix it. And so then I go home and I'm talking to my husband. I'm like, so the CMO wants you to fix he says the residents are unprofessional. And he told me to fix it. And he said, okay, that sounds like a complex problem. So I, of course, freaked out, did a bunch of reading, talked to a bunch of people, and decided to, I decided that my identity in the health system is as an educator. So what am I going to do? I am going to educate. So we formed this working group that's called the Interprofessional Culture and Collaboration Committee. And we were going to develop education around professionalism for all health providers, not just focused on residents. So that was our solution. And so that's what we did. It took us a little while. I thought we would have a whole bunch of curriculum rolled out in a year. I was wrong. It's taken about 5 years, and we have 2 modules that we've presented now, both in our institution and on a national level. So I think that I learned that it takes a long time to implement solutions. So I think when I was a resident, because you're always working in these 1 or 2 year blocks, my whole life was in a 1 year block. And I was like, I have to do all this stuff in 1 year or it'll never get done. As a faculty member, I realized I have like 5 or 10, I could take 15, 20, I could take 20 years if I want. It's amazing. My chair might be mad if I take 20 years on something, but I could if I wanted. So we're going to do a workshop activity, and we have about 25 minutes to do this. So before we jump into it, this is a problem-solving framework that I like to use. One, because I like that the acronym is the word PAUSE, because I think telling myself to slow down and pause is probably what I'm doing 90% of my day. Like, okay, I just need to sit down and relax. It's going to be okay. So PAUSE stands for perceive, ask, understand, strategize, and evaluate. So perceive is to observe and listen. Ask is ask questions to learn more about what's happening. Understand is understanding each participant's experience or viewpoint. Strategize is select and take action. And evaluate, look at the outcomes using some form of a reflective process. It could be a survey, it could be kind of a wrap-up meeting where you're asking members to reflect. So I really like this one is because one of my favorite things to do is strategize. I think it's like the most fun thing to say, okay, what are we going to do? How are we going to do it? And I also love hearing, I'm a diversity champion. So hearing our diverse perspectives are really, really important in my opinion. So I think this concept of asking questions and listening first before making decisions can be really helpful. Okay, case number 1. We were going to do breakout sessions, but I wasn't sure how many people were going to be here. So since not many, we're going to break out in this group. Okay, and I'm going to stop talking, which is so nice for me. And all of you will start talking. So you arrive at work and you have 7 messages from the residents. They're furious because they just lost 100 parking spots. And their demand is that you fix this immediately. What are some of your considerations? What approach do you take in solving the problem? And how can you apply the PAUSE framework? So I will stop talking and open it up to the group.
Hello.
Hi.
I was first asked, why did they lose the 10 parking spots? What was the reason behind all of this sudden change in the parking for the residents?
So the nursing union has told the leadership that the nurses want the parking spots?
I would also acknowledge the residents' emotions. You can tell they're furious. I think they want you to know that they're upset, and to acknowledge that, I think, is important.
Yes, acknowledging emotions goes a whole long way. Anything else?
Maybe finding out what stakeholders were actually present and involved in that decision and which ones were not, and then maybe just using that as a basis for approaching somebody in charge of that decision to ask them about the rationale.
I love that, collecting information around the issue. So the stakeholders involved were the CMO and the nursing union representative. Joyce, I feel like you have something to say.
Oh, just coming from the other side, I would ask, from the admin side, I would ask them what their solution to the residents' parking is if they're taking away 100 spots.
Great.
One of the possible solutions could be either making new parking available for the residents.
Great. So I guess what next steps would you all take?
I think it kind of depends on the relationships that you have at the institution. So if you know that a colleague or supervisor of yours has the ear of the CMO, or you do, then perhaps it could be a less formal process of using those pathways to approach the CMO. Otherwise, it might involve a more formal process of forming a committee with the residents and approaching it that way.
Mm-hmm. Great.
For our institution, the parking is actually written into our contracts. And so it's kind of a review of also the paperwork and also kind of like figuring out what are the institution's obligations for the residents as well.
I love that. I wonder what happened to get that written into the contract. Something must have happened. All right. So going back. Oh, sure. Go ahead. Go ahead.
I was gonna say, I think I would talk to the nursing union representative, or just kind of get an idea of why the nurses wanted those spots. What were the properties of it that made it more ideal, and try and find another solution that takes into account things that they needed, so that you can appease the nurses, but also defend the residents and what they need.
Mm-hmm. Great. Thank you. So going back to our pause framework. So what happened in this scenario, so this is something that happened to me. So I was like, oh no, it's too early in the morning for this. I'm just gonna take a pause. And so the first thing to do, I was like, okay, what do I do? Okay, first thing I need to do is I need to listen, right? So I emailed these 7 people that sent me the urgent messages, and I sent them back an urgent message, and I said, I need you to send me a description of how losing these parking spots have personally affected you by noon today. So that was my proceed, that was my ask. And then I received those emails and I read through them all. And I needed to understand the impact on the residents. And then the strategize was I then took the most powerful stories, and there was some pretty powerful narratives in there. One of them, for example, was a young woman who was a neurosurgery resident who has to come to the hospital in the middle of the night, and she has a history of trauma. And even without a history of trauma, she was very scared to walk from the new assigned parking spot to the hospital at 2 o'clock in the morning, 3 o'clock in the morning. And I felt that was a very compelling argument, that the safety of our residents is now being put in jeopardy because of this administrative decision. And so I then called the CMO, because I had access. I was able to do that at the time. Now, if I call the CMO, he'll hang up on me. And I said, the residents are very upset. And I said, I don't call you, but I'm calling you now because the residents are very upset, and I'm going to send you an email. And in the email, it's going to have some different reasons why losing the parking spots are very impactful for the residents. And I would like you to reevaluate if the residents can have some of those parking spots back. And it worked. So 50 spots are returned. So he said, okay, we'll get 50% of the spots back. And there's one resident who continues to be upset. It's not enough. And he is now put himself on strike. So, and he happened to be a resident that was in my internal medicine department. So it was kind of convenient, because I took off my hat as the resident medical staff committee chair, and I put on my hat as the chief resident. And I said, okay, now so he says that he will not come to work until you fix it. He wants all 100 spots returned. Everyone else was actually okay with the 50 spots, but this one particular person, he is furious, actually. And not only does he want that spot returned, but he is going to organize all of the residents to strike unless you give those all 100 spots back. So what are some of your considerations, and then what approach would you take to solving this problem?
I mean, I would start again with the pause framework and start again with the acknowledgement, like, you're still very upset. Tell me about it. What's going on? What's the story there? I think, that will probably go a long way. I mean, I have an immediate gut reaction, but I would not do that. And I would just instead pause and just acknowledge again his emotions and get a little bit more information from him in terms of why this is continuing not to please him. How is it still impacting him?
Yeah, and I think you've just role modeled something really, really important in leadership, is you get immediate gut reactions, and that's okay, right? We must give ourselves grace. We're gonna have immediate gut reactions, but try not to act on the gut reaction, because that's when you can get yourself in trouble. But going back to this framework around, our pause framework and talking to him. Who likes to talk to people who are furious with them? Nobody wants to do it.
But if you talk to them, then they often get less furious. Better.
Yeah. It's now 1 p.m. and you have to now have a crucial conversation around this. Okay. Anyone else? Some of your considerations, approaches you take in the problem solving. And this is a safe, although we're recorded, it's a safe space. So it's okay. Talk through. Okay, so yeah, I called him. I said, okay, you need to come to my office and we need to talk. So he shows up and he is he's physically furious. He's shaking and red. And I was like, sit down in the chair. You need a moment. The parking spots are not with a myocardial infarction. Please, let's sit down. And it was more about feeling like he's not respected as a resident and feeling like he works, he's on 40-hour calls, 30-hour calls, and he's sacrificed so much and doesn't get to spend time with his family. And the parking spots were just the tipping point for him. And so I just listened to him and he vented. And then I said, I'm sorry. I'm sorry that you've missed Christmas and you've missed New Year's with your babies. And I know next year, because he was graduating, I said, I know next year you're going to have the most amazing Christmas and the most amazing New Year. And you're almost there. So we talked about it. He calmed down. And there was no strike that occurred, which was great. I was grateful that that didn't happen. All right, let's do one more. There's a resident who got in an argument with his program director. He's convinced he should have been selected as chief resident. So this is obviously in a residency that has an extra year chief and is frustrated because he was not. He's demanding that you do something about it. What are some of your considerations? What approach do you take in solving the problem, and how can you apply the pause framework?
Starting off by listening. Using pause and just listening to his frustrations.
And I think that's even helpful. I mean, you may be in the situation where you have no control over the matter. It's not like your decision to make, right? But, and it would be easy to say like, well, I'm sorry, but like, I have nothing to do with this. Like, I can't do anything to do with this. But I think it would go so far. This person came to you to just listen, even if you can't. I think just that listening, I think is can be very therapeutic.
Great. Yeah, my gut response was like, what am I supposed to like? Because he was also very angry at me personally, because he felt that I had the power to influence this process, even though it's like a totally democratic process where there's lots of voting involved and things, all kinds of things that are so outside of my control. Unless I became the whip on that day, it would have been very hard to control the process. Yeah, but I let him vent at me, and then we chatted for a very long, like multiple hours. But again, it was about so much more. It was about not feeling appreciated in the role. And I think the thing that was hard about this was that there was no solution. There was no, the solution was take care of yourself, know your worth. You're going to do great. Let's figure out what you're going to do after you graduate to help you achieve your leadership goals. All right. So despite all the efforts, multiple months passes and he's still mad. And it's actually so bad that now any interaction between the program director and him in any space is resulting in like these knockdown, drag out arguments. So now what do you do?
I think part of this is trying to help refocus goals and kind of like thinking about you're graduating this year. This is not a sustainable thing to be. This is not sustainable. And it's not healthy for you either. And kind of like redirecting the focus. But it's hard because there's lots of emotions.
Lots of emotions.
I think, Olivia, you had talked about how first you talked to him about sort of Yeah, reframing and what are your leadership goals? I think sort of trying to approach it in the, like, let's talk about like long-term strategy. Like long-term strategy is continuing to fight with your program director going to get you where you want to be, you know, or with sort of staying quiet for the remainder of this because it's over, and thinking again, strategizing like how might this relationship may help you in the future, you know, in other ways, rather than thinking about the sort of immediate, like, this is, you know, I feel wronged here and now, and this is what I want to do here and now, sort of saying like, let's take like the long view and where, you know, where does this be, what kind of behavior will help you reach those goals after residency?
Yeah, we then had to have the talk of, do you want to be a doctor? Because if you continue to behave like this, you are putting your medical license and your practice in jeopardy. So you got to stop. I also had to pull the program director. I said, you need to come talk to me. Because I said, you cannot engage in this, right? Like, I had to talk with both of them about the behavior because it was so out of control. And why I felt I was in the middle of it, I don't know, but maybe because I was. But we had to have the talk. I had to talk to both of them. So the resident actually, you know, I was very impressed by how this resident continued to be angry and channeled his anger. Actually, he found something to channel his anger into, which was he decided that he was going to unionize the residents. And he secretly got all the signatures and all the things to unionize the residents. And then it came out in the local newspaper that the residents at UC Davis Medical Center were unionizing. And this is how the executive leadership found out about it. And my jaw hit the floor. I was like, I have never seen anything like this in my life. But I talked to him. He said, I took all that anger and I decided to channel it into this process. And I'm so proud of myself. And I said, you know, I'm proud of you too. I said, anyone hears me say that, I would be burned at the stake. But I'm proud of you because you took a really bad situation and you stopped fighting, and instead you turned it into something that is productive. It's more productive than fighting in the hallway with someone in leadership. So I was impressed by the whole thing, but I know some people were not. Okay. So, sorry, I have to move my little screen here. So some questions as you're going into, so I hope you all who are residents take an interest in GME because it's super fun. I hope you all who are junior faculty become leaders in GME. And I hope you all who are mid or senior faculty become program directors because we need great program directors. So does GME leadership align with my personal and professional interests? Think about who are your role models, who are your mentors, who do you wish you could be? Also think about who do you want to replace because you could or would do it better and wish you had the opportunity. And you can develop the skills and attributes that will help you achieve all of your goals. So when you aren't feeling like you can achieve your goals, just remember I told you you could and you'll feel better. All right, any questions?
I just have a comment. Olivia, thank you. That was great. You said something almost in passing, but I think it's so important when you were talking about the scenario of the parking spots initially and how you had called the CMO of the hospital and you said something like, well, look, I never call you, but I'm calling you. You know, I think you were sort of recognizing this, like the concept of like political capital, right? So like we all have some, but you have to think about like how you want to use it and when you use it, right? Because if you called the CMO over every little petty issue, you would get no traction. But I think you saved it and you recognize, okay, this is a big deal. It's really impacting my residents. I need to do something about it. And so then you sort of put that chip down. So I think that's really important for all of us to think about in terms of leadership. You know, we make those decisions like, what am I going to push forward? What am I going to hold back on, to prioritize? Because we don't have endless amounts of political capital, as much as we'd like to think we do.
One day we will, but this current moment, no, we do not.
We all have it. Like students, Joanna's my student. She has it. You know what I mean? And I think we, all of us at whatever stage of training, need to recognize that we do have it. And it's just, how do we be smart about using it?
Yeah, I remember having this moment where I was like, oh, people listen to me. I need to be careful what comes out of my mouth because I just said this thing and now 50 of the residents are like just repeating what I said. And was that really the impact I was trying to have when I said it, right? So yeah, leaders are powerful people. Okay. All right. Well, thank you so much. You're a great audience.
Thank you. It was a terrific presentation. I think all of us will take home lessons from it. Thanks so much. So I think our next session's at 11:30. So and again, there's, I think, 2 concomitant sessions. So you're welcome to come back to this Zoom link or to attend the second one. But we'll see you back at 11:30 then. Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye.